when San Francisco's Castro district was hailed as the mecca of gay liberation on the American West Coast. A young black man, later known as the Doodler, would appear in the late hours at all-night diners or linger in the corners of gay bars, approaching solitary white gay men, usually middle-aged white guys. He would introduce himself as an art school student or a cartoonist, then pull a pen from his pocket and sketch animals on napkins or draw a portrait of his target. Like my doodles? That simple question in that artsy bohemian city was dangerously charming. That was how he built connections with these men. But it was also his trap. When he lured them to secluded beaches or parks, Ocean Beach, Golden Gate Park, Land's End, their fate was death. The Doodler, a serial killer never brought to trial, committed one of the most notorious cold cases in American history from January 1974 to June 1975. Though San Francisco Police Department officially confirmed 6 victims, some seasoned investigators believe the true death toll could be as high as 14. Unlike the infamous Zodiac killer case, also in San Francisco, the Doodler's crimes nearly vanished from history, only resurfacing in recent years. One victim's family didn't even learn until nearly half a century later that their loved one had been murdered by someone called the Doodler. Let's be real here, the cases that grab headlines and police attention are usually the ones involving middle-class white girls, cisgender and respectable. Doodler's victims? Gay men? Back then, the San Francisco Police Department even had dedicated units to surveil and trap and systematically harass the gay community under vice laws. In the early hours of January 27, 1974, the San Francisco Police Department received an anonymous call. "I believe there may be a dead body," the caller said, "at Ocean Beach, across from Oloa Street, if you follow the street right down to the water." No one knew who the caller was, probably just a witness who didn't want any trouble. When several officers arrived at Ocean Beach, what greeted them was the sight of a male corpse lying face down on the sand. He looked to be around 50, bald, heavyset, with 16 stab wounds scattered across his back and chest, including defensive wounds on his arms. It took the police several days just to identify the victim, 49-year-old Gerald Kavanagh, a furniture refinisher from Canada, a closeted gay man living alone in Haight-Ashbury. One man was murdered and 16 people were stabbed. Today, this will be the front page news everywhere. But what about that time? Local newspapers didn't cover it much and the police didn't prioritize it. Because it was the early days of gay liberation, and no one really cared about the lives of those who deviated from the norms. The police often ignore crimes against homosexuals, and they have even set up a specialized force to arrest them. One openly gay investigator later recalled, people were getting robbed, harassed, beaten. The Doodler just took it to another level. He killed them, and he got away with it because, first of all, the police honestly didn't care. And even after a second victim turned up, nothing changed. 5 months later, on June 25th, a woman out for her morning walk found a body in the bush near Spreckles Lake in Golden Gate Park. It was 27-year-old Joseph Stevens, 3 stab wounds, piercing his lungs and abdomen. There wasn't much blood at the scene. Chances are he'd crawled there alive, desperately trying to escape whoever he'd come to the lake with in those final moments of his life. But real panic didn't set in until July 7th, when a woman walking her dog, she later admitted she had nightmares for years, found Klaus Christmann at Ocean Beach. This 31-year-old German immigrant had died horrifically, his throat slashed, 15 stab wounds across his body. Christmann was different from the previous victims. He was a married father in San Francisco just to visit friends. When police found a tube of makeup in his pocket, investigators sat with that detail in silence for a long time. It hit them then. An unknown serial killer was hunting men who kept their sexuality hidden. The gay community realized it too, that someone was randomly attacking their own. So men in the Castro started warning each other, don't go off alone with strangers, especially not to Ocean Beach or Golden Gate Park. The next case came on April 27, 1975. 52-year-old postal attorney Warren Andrews was found at Land's End, his face unrecognizable. This time, the killer didn't use a knife. he beat Andrews into unconsciousness with rocks and tree branches. Andrews lingered in a hospital bed for 7 weeks before succumbing to his injuries. He never regained consciousness, never got to describe his attacker. His death wasn't officially linked to the Doodler until 2022, when his sister first heard the killer's nickname from police, nearly half a century later. On May 12th, 32-year-old Frederick Capin was found behind the sand dunes at Ocean Beach. This Vietnam veteran, a registered nurse who'd risked his life under fire to save 4 wounded Marines. His chest was stabbed multiple times, one blow slicing through his aorta. Evidence at the scene showed the Doodler had dragged his body at least 20 feet after killing him. The last confirmed victim was 66-year-old Swedish sailor Harold Goldberg, his remains discovered in the bushes at Lincoln Park Golf Course on June 4th. By then, he'd been decomposing for nearly 10 days, his face so eaten away by maggots that he was barely identifiable. There were 3 survivors in the Doodler case. Their testimonies could have been the key to arresting this killer, yet they ended up becoming silent witnesses of that era. One of them was a European diplomat. One night in July 1975, this diplomat met a young black man doodling at a restaurant. For reasons unclear, he accepted an invitation back to his apartment. There, the young man stabbed him 6 times in the back, nearly killing him. Terrified for his career and family reputation, he refused to go public, refused to testify in court. Even in 2021, when a San Francisco Chronicle reporter tried to track him down, he chose to remain silent. The second survivor lived on the same floor as the diplomat. They didn't know each other, yet both were attacked within 2 weeks. They never acknowledged one another. In those days, gay men living in the same building often deliberately avoided each other, because any connection could become evidence against them. This second survivor spent the most time with the killer. He provided police with the most detailed description of the Doodler's speech, mannerisms, and methods. The third survivor was described as a well-known entertainer, rumored to be some Hollywood celebrity. Police tried contacting him multiple times, never getting a response. The silence of these 3 survivors creates the cruelest irony of the Doodler case. They were the only ones who could identify him. Their testimony could have built the case. Yet social terror rendered them voiceless. In November 1975, based on information from the diplomat and the second survivor, police finally released a detailed sketch of the Doodler to the public. A young black man, tall and thin, around 6 feet, wearing a dark navy-style watch cap. In their bulletin, they deliberately emphasized his preference. He liked targeting foreigners, people unfamiliar with the city. Obviously, this wasn't random. Outsiders were more dependent on strangers' kindness, sitting alone in gay bars while the Doodler sat beside them, moving in. After the sketch was released, police received 2 leads. One came from a Bay Area psychologist who claimed his patient, a gay man who'd started dating women in an attempt to correct his orientation through therapy, had possibly confessed to the murders. But investigators never confirmed this patient was the suspect, and doctor-patient confidentiality applied. Even if the psychologist had been willing to break ethics, the law wouldn't have allowed his testimony in court anyway. The second lead came from an anonymous woman who called multiple times over 10 days, providing a suspect's name and license plate, a specific, traceable identity. Even more shocking, at least 2 other people independently gave police the same name. In an era without computerized databases or cross-referencing systems, 3 separate sources pointing to the same name should have been a breakthrough. Yet police never released the name, nor explained why this lead didn't result in an arrest. Perhaps they couldn't locate the anonymous woman to get her to testify formally. In 1976, police told newspapers and made public statements that they'd interviewed a strong suspect, a young black man with a history of psychiatric treatment for sexual issues. At a 2022 press conference, they still said that same interviewed suspect remained their focus. But the central dilemma hasn't changed. Prosecuting the Doodler requires all 3 survivors to testify publicly. That means they can't remain anonymous. They have to face the defendant, the public, and the media in open court. An activist and politician who later became a major figure in San Francisco's gay rights movement said at a community meeting, "I understand their position. I respect the pressure society puts on them." What that activist basically meant was this: asking survivors to testify was asking them to become martyrs, not for justice, but for a justice system that never protected them. In those days, cops were still entrapping gay men on various charges while demanding those same men step forward for their cases. Several years ago, forensic genetic genealogy led to the arrest of the Golden State Killer after decades in hiding. Inspired by this, San Francisco police reopened the Doodler investigation. They submitted DNA samples from 2 murders for modern testing, and in 2021 they found new DNA evidence from Andrew's crime scene. Meanwhile, they raised the reward to $250,000 and released an age progression sketch of the Doodler. They say they will never give up on the case.